Living without regret. The Buddhist way to carry your past. You're in the middle of your day, and out of nowhere, a memory shows up. A word you wish you never said. A decision you wish you'd made differently. A person you wish you'd treated better when you still had the chance. You know, with absolute clarity, that it's done. You can't go back, but your mind doesn't care. It keeps replaying, over and over. The pain of regret isn't really about what happened. It's about knowing you cannot change it, and yet some part of you keeps trying. As if thinking about it one more time might somehow unlock a door back to that moment. But the door doesn't open. And still, you knock. The advice you'll hear most often: just let it go. Live in the present. But if that advice actually worked, none of us would still be awake at 2 a.m. going through old conversations in our heads. So today, I want to go somewhere deeper than that. I want to look at regret the way the Buddha actually looked at it, through something older and more honest than modern self-help. And I should be upfront with you. I'm not someone who has moved past all regret. I still have those nights. But my relationship with those nights has changed, and that shift is what I want to share. So if you're carrying something from the past and you don't quite know how to put it down, stay with me. There's a reason just forget about it never works. Your mind doesn't have a delete button. The harder you try to push a memory away, the more vividly it returns. Psychology calls this the ironic process theory. Try it right now. Don't think of a pink elephant. You just did. Regret works the same way. And this is where most people get stuck, caught between the pain of remembering and the impossibility of forgetting. Why can't I just move on? Everyone is asking that question. They're just not saying it out loud. There's a strange shame attached to not being able to let go, as if holding on to the past is a failure of willpower. But it isn't. It's simply how the mind works. Now here's a point I want you to really hear. In the entire body of the Buddha's original teachings, he never once told you to forget the past. Nowhere in the Pali Canon does the Buddha say, erase what happened from your mind. What he taught was entirely different. His concern was never with the content of your memory, what you did, what was said, what happened. His concern was with how you carry it. And that distinction changes everything, because one way of carrying the past keeps you running from it. The other lets you stand still, right in the middle of it, without being destroyed. To understand what that means, we need to look at a distinction that almost everyone misses, and this confusion causes far more suffering than most people realize. In the Buddha's teaching, there are two things related to regret that look similar on the surface, but lead to completely opposite places. The first is kukkucca, obsessive remorse. The Buddha listed it among the 5 hindrances, the 5 major mental obstacles that block clarity and inner. In the original teachings, kukkucca appears paired with uddhacca, restlessness, as a single combined hindrance, restlessness and remorse. That pairing tells you something important. The Buddha saw them as 2 sides of the same agitation. Kukkucca is the mind chewing on what it did wrong, going over and over the same ground, producing heat and tightness with no resolution, no exit. It just circles. The second is hiri and ottappa. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha called these 2 bright qualities that guard the world. Hiri is the inner discomfort you feel when you know you've acted wrongly. Ottappa is the clear awareness of consequences. The Buddha said that without these 2, there would be no recognition of mother, no recognition of teacher's wife, no recognition of those who deserve respect, the world would fall into chaos, no different from animals living without any moral order. The entire fabric of human society holds together because these two qualities are alive in us. So the Buddha never said, "Don't feel anything about your mistakes." The ability to look at yourself honestly, to feel the weight of a wrong action, that's a sign of a healthy conscience. A person who never feels any regret about anything is not wise. They're disconnected. Where does the problem begin then? It begins when recognition turns into obsession. Hiri says, "I made a mistake. I see it clearly. What do I do differently?" Kukkucca says, "I made a mistake. I'm terrible. I'll always be terrible." And then it says the same thing again tomorrow, and the day after that. The strange thing about kukkucca is that it disguises itself as growth. It feels like you're processing, working through it, being responsible. But if you watch carefully, nothing is actually moving. The same guilt is being rehearsed. It has the appearance of depth without any of the transformation. Most of us fall into this because we confuse self-punishment with responsibility. We believe that if we stop tormenting ourselves about the past, it means we don't care. We wear guilt like a badge, as if suffering proves we're good people. But the Buddha saw this clearly. Endless self-torment is, at its root, a form of clinging, upadana. Clinging to the image of "I am the one who failed," clinging to the story "I can never be whole again." And clinging, whether to pleasure, to identity, or even to pain, always produces suffering. That's the second noble truth. It doesn't make exceptions for the clinging that looks noble. So I'll leave you with a question worth sitting with. The regret you're carrying right now, is it hiri or kukkucca? Is it a lamp showing you where to walk, or a rope keeping you exactly where you are? So if the mind can't simply erase the past, and if healthy conscience and destructive guilt are so easy to confuse, then how does a person actually arrive at a place where the weight begins to lift? The Buddha's answer to this is one of the most surprising things in his entire teaching, because it doesn't begin with meditation or with some deep spiritual breakthrough. It begins with something remarkably ordinary. There's a passage in the Anguttara Nikaya, the Satanakaraniya Sutta, where the Buddha lays out a natural chain of cause and effect that unfolds in the life of a practitioner. And the foundation of the entire chain is this: virtue, sīla, the way you live your daily life. When a person lives with integrity, when their actions and speech are grounded in care, the Buddha said something remarkable. There is no need for an act of will. May freedom from remorse arise in me. It is in the nature of things that freedom from remorse arises in a person consummate in virtue. Freedom from remorse, avipattasara, is not something you have to force. It arises on its own. And from that freedom, the Buddha said, joy naturally arises. From joy, rapture. From rapture, serenity. From serenity, pleasure. From pleasure, concentration. And the chain continues further still. From concentration, the ability to see things as they actually are. From that clear seeing, disenchantment. From disenchantment, dispassion. And from dispassion, release. Look at that structure carefully. Every step unfolds from the one before it, and the Buddha repeats the same phrase at each stage. There is no need for an act of will. It is in the nature of things. You don't force any of it. You don't manufacture peace. You create the conditions, through how you live, through sīla, and the rest follows by its own nature, like water flowing downhill. And notice where it all begins, not with some advanced spiritual practice, not with years of retreat, but with how you speak to people, with how you handle your responsibilities, with whether you tell the truth when it would be easier not to, the most ordinary things. And yet, according to the Buddha, this is where the entire chain of inner freedom has its root. That changes everything about how you approach regret. Instead of trying to force the past out of your mind, you build a life where the past doesn't become a weight. But then the obvious question: what about the past that's already heavy? The words already spoken, the damage already done. The Buddha addressed this directly. Acknowledge what you've done, fully, honestly, without excuses. Feel the weight of it. That's hiri doing its work. And then act. Change direction. Live differently from this point forward. The Dhammapada captures this in verse 173. Whoever overwhelms the evil they have done with good lights up this world, as does the moon freed from clouds. Notice the image carefully. The moon doesn't destroy the clouds. The clouds were real. They happened. They darkened the sky for a time, but they passed. And the light that was always there became visible again. Your past doesn't disappear, but it can be placed in a new context, shaped by who you're becoming, rather than forever defined by who you were. So ask yourself, are you spending your energy trying to force yourself to feel no regret? Or are you building, day by day, a way of living where that heaviness gradually lifts on its own? When that memory hits in the middle of the night and the old film starts playing again, what do you actually do with it? Because understanding why regret works the way it does, and understanding what the Buddha taught, that matters. But understanding alone doesn't stop the chest from tightening. Letting go, in the way Buddhism means it, happens in a very specific moment. A moment so quiet you might miss it. It's the moment you catch yourself being pulled into the loop. The memory surfaces. The tightness starts. The familiar monologue begins. If only I had... And right there, something in you sees it. You notice, the loop is starting again. That tiny moment of seeing, that's where letting go lives. You didn't push anything away or fight it. You simply saw what was happening. And in that seeing, the grip loosens. Maybe just enough for one full breath. That is sati, mindfulness in its rawest form. Not a concept from a wellness app. The unglamorous, moment-to-moment awareness of what the mind is doing. In the kitchen, on the highway, in bed at midnight. I know how that sounds. You've been carrying this weight for years. Maybe it has shaped your entire sense of who you are. And the suggestion is, notice what's happening. But here's what I've found, through practice, and through failing at practice many times. The power of regret doesn't come from the memory itself. It comes from the fact that we get pulled in without realizing it. When the loop runs in the dark, it has total control. But the moment you see it as it's happening, this is kukkucca running, something shifts. The loop doesn't vanish, but it loses a degree of its authority. Not every time. Sometimes it still wins. But over weeks, over months, the balance changes. Letting go may be the hardest thing a human being ever has to do, because it asks you to stay present with something painful, without running from it, and without drowning in it. It asks you to hold your own wound in open hands, just holding it, with full awareness, and allowing it to be what it is. And maybe that is also what makes it one of the most beautiful things we're capable of. Because in that moment, the moment you stand fully present with your past without being swept away, you are offering your own heart the kind of space it has been asking for. The space of someone who sees clearly and still chooses to remain open. The entire path of practice, sīla, samadhi, paññā, leads toward exactly this capacity, to meet what is as it is. There's a simple way to check where you stand with any regret. Ask yourself, have I already learned what this had to teach me? If the answer is yes, if you already know what went wrong, if you've already changed, then the regret has finished its work. And one thing worth saying plainly, some wounds don't heal completely. The memory might still sting when it surfaces. Certain dates might always carry a shadow. That's not failure. That's being human. The Buddha himself, even after awakening, still felt physical pain when ill or injured. The body hurt. But the mind didn't pile suffering on top of it, didn't add a story to the sensation. That distinction between the pain that arrives on its own and the suffering we construct around it is, in many ways, the entire teaching. You may not be able to stop a painful memory from arising, but you don't have to build a life sentence out of it. The memory comes, it hurts, and then, if you let it, it passes. There's one more thing I want to look at before we close, and it only becomes visible when the grip of regret begins, even slightly, to loosen. When you spend years replaying the past, there's an obvious cost: the pain, the guilt, the sleepless nights. But there's another cost that's harder to see, because it's not a presence. It's an absence. While your mind is 10 years in the past, your daughter is telling you something at the dinner table. Your friend is sitting across from you, waiting to be heard. The rain is falling outside in a way it will never fall again, and you're not there for any of it. This is what regret quietly takes from you, the life that's happening right now, while you're busy with the one that already happened. And this is perhaps the deepest reason the Buddha placed so much emphasis on the present moment. The present is the only place where your life is actually unfolding. Everything else, every regret, every worry, every imagined future, is the mind visiting a place that doesn't exist anymore, or doesn't exist yet. And while it visits, the real thing passes by unnoticed. I think about this sometimes. How many genuine moments of connection I wasn't fully present for because part of me was still in some room from years ago. Those moments didn't wait for me. They came and went. And that's its own kind of loss. Quieter than the original regret, but just as real. When the weight of the past begins to lift, and it does, slowly, unevenly, with many setbacks, what you find underneath is simple. You can taste your coffee again. You can hear what someone is saying without half your mind being elsewhere. A walk down a familiar street feels like something worth being present for. These are small things, but they are your life. And they were always there, waiting for you to come back. And none of what we've talked about today is an invitation to live recklessly. The path the Buddha pointed to was quieter and far more demanding. Live with enough awareness and care that when you look back, you know you gave it what you had. You may still have been wrong, but you weren't asleep. And when you fell short, you saw it and kept walking. So, I'll close with this. The regret you're carrying. How long have you had it? And in all that time, what has it actually changed? Or has it simply kept you standing in the same place, staring at a door that closed long ago, while behind you, a whole life was quietly unfolding without you in it? The Buddha never promised a life without pain. He pointed to a path where pain can arise without becoming a prison, where the past can exist, fully and honestly, without owning your future. And that path begins here, In the moment you notice the old loop starting, and you choose, for the first time, or for the 1000th, to let it turn without climbing inside. Not because you've conquered anything, but because, this time, you saw it. And seeing it was enough to bring you back, to here, to now, to the life that's still yours. That's letting go. And it doesn't happen once. It happens moment by moment. And each time you notice, you're already on the path.